Hi, I'm Danielle Vega. You might know me as Kim on Barney and Friends, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. I'll be here with us. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm your host, Jake Steffenbaugh. With me today, as always, our co-host Chris Bixby and Matt Bingle. How you guys doing?
We're great.
Doing great. Hi, everybody. How are you, Jake?
Doing great as always, Matt. Thank you for asking.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes, we got a terrific interview for you folks today. Another Barney person, and certainly.
Which I'm sure you all will enjoy this one too. So,
Yes.
Yeah, we
not surprised that you all will enjoy this one. So, we don't need to say any more of it. Chris.
But Chris is going to introduce it anyway. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Be glad to. Today's interview is with David Bernard Wolf. Some of David's earliest work in the music business includes founding his own audio production company, Crywolf Productions, and producing and recording audio content for the Chuck E. Cheese franchise. For several years, as a lot of you would probably know him best from, he was one of the songwriters and music directors for the Barney franchise. And he also founded Audivita Studios. So we hope you enjoy our chat with David all about Barney, Chuck E. Cheese, the type of work Audivita does, and so much more. We're sure you'll enjoy our chat. Here it is.
See you then. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive.
Yes, happy you're here with us, folks. Today we're pleased to welcome our guest, David Bernard Wolf. David, happy to have you here. How are you?
Hey, great to have you guys. How are you doing today?
We're doing great.
Doing good, David. Thank you for asking.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Glad for you to be here.
For sure. So to kick this off, we know who you are, but for those who don't, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and the type of work that you do?
Sure. So, I'm now in my mid 60s, so I've had a few careers, but the one that's probably most pertinent to the discussion we're going to have today is my music career, which started in Chicago, where I grew up, northern suburbs of Chicago, and started as a drummer, and then began to learn composition and film scoring, and eventually started working in the music for advertising, commercial music space. Learned that business in Chicago from a guy that's kind of part of the history of music for advertising, a guy named Dick Marks. For anybody who knows Richard Marks, the pop star, this is his father. So Dick hired me, and I learned the business. Yeah, and I learned the business from them. I had a little office in their building at 101 East Ontario in Chicago, North Michigan Avenue, for those who are familiar with Chicago, and learned that business. Learned how to write jingles, learned how to sync music to film, got to work and understand how to write music for products and to promote brands and products. So we worked on everything from, Snap Crackle Pop Rice Krispies to Kraft macaroni and cheese to all kinds of brands as you've heard of. And so this was my early, I spent about 5 years with Dick, and then from there I got married in 1985, so it's 1,000 years ago, and my wife Phyllis and I moved to Dallas, Texas, where I started my own production company called Crywolf Music. And so over the course of the next 13 or 14 years, we built a business up doing much of what I now knew how to do, which was write and produce for radio, TV, and film. So the Dallas market, we had a chance to work on a lot of brands with a lot of ad agencies. And I also got a chance to know our friends at the Barney Company, which I'll tell you about, and we'll unpack that a little more. And related to that, Chuck E. Cheese. But the business was really grounded in doing commercials. So I literally had a demo reel of some fake commercials and some that had actually been on the air from my days in Chicago, and started calling the creative directors at these ad agencies in Dallas, and eventually got the chance to do some low budget projects for Pepsi and this and that, and eventually went to Doritos, which is part of the same PepsiCo company, and worked on a lot of, regional McDonald's, and gradually, the levels of the project got more visible. I worked on stuff like Embassy Suites hotels and budget rent-a-car, and there's a whole slew of Southwest Airlines, American Airlines, all kinds of stuff. And some of it was long form, some of it was short form, but this is all pre-internet. I mean, we're talking 1985 through 1997.
Yeah.
So that period of time was, AOL was basically barely a twinkle in an eye, so it was very early stage. In terms of music production, the way we write and sync music to film was going through a revolution of its own, which really started back in 1981-ish or so. It really started before that, but we were just starting. For those who are familiar with music production, MIDI was just coming in. MIDI is the way you connect musical instruments with each other into a digital audio workstation in music production.
Right.
So we were just starting to get into syncing to 3/4 inch tape using SMPTE code. And I mean, there's a lot of technical things happening while I was transitioning to having my own company. And we adapted. I eventually bought a system called the Synclavier system, which was a late 70s, the best sampling technology of its time. There was a music interface, and then there was also and stop me if you don't care about the technology, but there was a music interface, and there was also a post-production tower. It was a big tower that needed its own cooling system and its own USB backup supply and power. And you basically wrapped your whole studio around these systems. They were huge. And then you would augment with the MIDI gear, the out-integrated MIDI. Now it's all in a digital audio workstation that fits in a Mac Air. But at the time, these were mini computers in a big closet with air conditioning. It was a whole different thing. And it was a time when having a 1 megabyte Winchester drive was a big deal. Okay. Well, maybe not 1 megabyte, but let's say 10 megabytes.
Right.
And we had optical drives for storage, and it was a very primitive form of what a lot of guys are doing now. But it was the early stage of sampling and beginning to put sequencing to film and doing those kinds of projects. Of course, there are a lot of great players in the Dallas market coming out of North Texas State University. So I had the pleasure of working with some really great rhythm section players, drums, bass, guitar, keyboards, and then also horn and strings. So I would often use the technology as a basis for syncing to the film or the framework for the commercial or the piece of music we were doing. And then we would add live players and singers. And we had abundance of them in that market. Dallas was famous for, speaking of nostalgia, for all the old school like radio call letters.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, WMAQ, all those, what they used to call jingles in the radio business. Most of those were done out of Dallas with those singers.
Oh,
so
wow.
I had a chance to work with these musicians that were just phenomenal. You could write anything, very dense scoring and with complex harmonies, jazz oriented harmonies, if you like, and they could read it right away in a couple takes. It'd be done. I mean, they were just used to cranking this stuff out. There was Jam Productions, there was TM Century, and there were a couple of others that were doing nothing but jingles for radio stations, and they would syndicate them all over the world. Well, that industry started in Dallas. And so I had the pleasure of working with a lot of those folks. We would overlap. They'd go from one session to another session, and some of them were mine. And so it was a beautiful time. I was still in my 20s, and I was making good money, and I was doing what I loved. And during that period, I was working on, I met a guy through one of the singers we were working with that eventually landed me the Chuck E. Cheese restaurant as a client. So at the time, there were Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, they were
overlapping.
brand, yeah, they were overlapping
Right.
brands, and they were owned by at the time Brock Hotel Corporation owned them all, and they were based in Irving, Texas. So I ended up for about 3, 4, maybe 4 years doing all the music for all the Chuck E. Cheese and Showbiz Pizza restaurants internationally. And these were cover tunes. So we would come up with Western TV shows, and then we'd cover all the themes from these TV shows, or we do Michael Jackson, and they had a blanket licensing agreement. So
Yeah.
I redid with the characters from Chuck E. Cheese. They would be the singers, but the tracks were true to the originals. So it was a really bizarre out of body experience because these really wacky voices, Munch and in Chuck E. Cheese, and Helen the hen, and all these crazy characters were doing these cartoon voices, doing serious covers of tunes that by Springsteen and Michael Jackson. It was really bizarre. And so one of the guys that was doing two of the voices, Pasquale and one of the others, I can't remember. There was a character called
Jasper.
Jasper.
Jasper and Pasquale, very good. And his name is Bob West. And Bob is very talented voice guy. Now lives in Los Angeles.
Yes.
He's also a very talented graphic artist. I haven't talked to Bob in probably 30 years. But
he's wonderful.
Bob pulled me aside one day while we were in a Chuck E. Cheese, and he said, I'm working with this new thing called Barney, and they're up in Allen, Texas at this little studio. Cheryl Leach started this thing with Dennis DeShazer and Kathy Parker. And at the time, they were financed by Cheryl's father, Dick Leach. And he had moved from Chicago to avoid the unionization of the printing business. So he was in the Christian publishing business. And Cheryl invented this thing called Barney that eventually was created by these three people, Kathy, Dennis, and Cheryl. And eventually I got to meet them. And through a series of demos, and they already had one music producer. I was the second one they added. And they added a third guy whose name is Joe Phillips. And so the three of us were working on the combinations of things. It was the writing of songs. It was the television series, which I did not work on directly. It was videos, which I did work on. I was writing songs. I have about 45 or 50 songs in their catalog today. And I'm still collecting some amount of royalties because there's still international activity with the product.
And streaming too. A lot of the videos have appeared on streaming now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm getting mechanicals and I'm getting mostly sync rights. I mean, there were a couple of golden years, but there's still a little trail on this thing. Like a lot of these products, they find their way on the shelf and they sort of become just a part of history. But there's still some broadcast going on, and so I got to meet them and I became a part of their team. And so over the next 4 or 5 years, I recorded, I think, 6 albums. I wrote songs for all of them. We did a lot of cover tunes, some public domain, and it was a wonderful ride. They were a great client. And eventually they grew to that company to, all in about a $500 million enterprise, with all the international and Radio City Music Hall and all these things they were doing. And I was working on publishing stuff. Then they were called Books on Tape for kids and all these different product groups that we crossed over. But it was a fabulous and very satisfying period. So I'll pause here because I know that was of interest to you guys.
That's a great story of how you kind of got into it and how a lot of that stuff came about. That's very, very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. In midstream there. So I want to say hi to Matt.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's all right. It's all right. It's all good. Nice to be here. So did you always want to work in music as a career?
Yeah, as a 11-year-old person, I was a drummer, and I studied drums with a fabulous teacher in Evanston, Illinois, where I'm from Chicago. You missed the setup. And I left Chicago in 1985 when I was 25 and started this music production business that we just kind of finished talking about. But the music thing was the bug very early. My father was somewhat musical. My mom is not particularly musical, but there was a day in my life where he brought me to the music store. He was playing guitar and studying with a guy there locally, jazz guitar. And he brought me to a music store and I saw the shiny drum set. And that was it for me. It was a way I started connecting. Our line for the company is connect your voice to the world. So there it is. So this is the way I started to connect to the world, through the drumming. And so at 11, I started studying with Fred and became a pretty good player. I played with a lot of great players in Chicago. I had the privilege of working with a lot of small group jazz players. I played fusion. I was a member of a band called Bagel of Fun. We played at Chicago Fest. Played with a pianist, composer named Bradley Young at the time. And we had a jazz trio. I briefly went out to Berklee College of Music in Boston and studied percussion and some composition there for about a year. I didn't last long at Berklee. I came back to Chicago and began studying composition and music and ear training and vocal and keyboards all in Chicago. I kind of assembled my own curriculum. Never got a degree, but knew I wanted to make more money, and I became interested in things that took me beyond what the drums could provide from a creative standpoint. So I learned the vocabulary of composing. And so with that, we had some friends in the business that knew the advertising music business. I took that model and thought I could do this. And so the way I broke into that business, and I'm condensing a couple of years, but I was beginning to be able to write. And you learn when you're writing and composing, the way you learn is by writing and hearing your stuff played by real players. So I had my first real job was I was a drummer in the Dixieland band at Marriott's Great America, which is about an hour north of Chicago in a little town called Gurnee, Illinois, right on the border of Wisconsin and Illinois. And so for several years, I was playing in this Dixieland band. The instrumentation was tuba, no bass. It was tuba, banjo, tenor sax, trombone, trumpet, and myself. And that's where I really learned how to play with people and learned how to improvise jazz, and then from there I did more modern things and I met other players through these guys, but that was the gig. We would play 6 sets a day, and I was making, for me at the time, was a lot of money. I think they paid us $12 an hour. So we were paid by the hour, but we did like 12 sets a day, strolling in the park. And, it was basically a Six Flags, that's what it was. At the time it was owned by Marriott. I don't know if they still operate and own those parks, but it was a great experience. It was like my college, experience. And
Nice.
and so that's really what set the stage for me being a professional drummer, and then ultimately leading to my entree into the commercial music business. But what I started to say was I took a magazine and made fake commercials based on the verbiage in the magazine ads and musified them, made them into musical things, and made fake 30-second commercials out of these, and then hired musicians to come into the studio. And that's how I learned how to do this. I just started doing it and found my way into the business. So.
Nice. So now, getting into the music side of things, who were some of your biggest musical influences or inspirations?
Yes. So, initially I was most intrigued and interested in playing jazz and fusion and related, sort of what you might call kind of complex chords and harmonies and musical forms. So I listened to, bands like the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Chick Corea's Return to Forever. They were very big early on for me, and the players that played on those records were important to me. Billy Cobham as a drummer, who's still around, of course, and Tony Williams, who has deceased, but he was with the famous Miles Davis Quintet during a certain number of years. So Tony was a big influence for me. Other drummers like Jack DeJohnette, who played with a lot of greats. And some of the more traditional drummers like Max Roach and others that were more, sort of traditional in their drumming approach. Buddy Rich, of course. There's a whole long list of drummers. And then as I moved into writing music, I began to listen to the film scoring greats of the Hollywood period. Of course, John Williams kind of wraps all these guys into his own.
Yeah.
And for guys your age, he's already old school. But the guys he listened to were Max Steiner, Dmitri Tiomkin, Franz Waxman, Jerry Goldsmith, all the great film scoring guys of the Hollywood golden age. And then the modernists behind. Goldsmith was a little bit more of a modernist. He did films like the neo-noir film. I don't know if you're familiar with the film Chinatown with Jack Nicholson and Faye Dunaway.
Yeah,
If you're a film buff, you might know some of these names. Again, I'm in my mid 60s, so that there's a natural course to my influences. But I listened to film music and really tried to apply a lot of what I was learning from a vocabulary perspective into this advertising work that I did. And I did work with some filmmakers. I worked on one feature film that was a combination of animated and live action, a film that was never released. It was called Veritas. And that was fascinating because it was really the first long form film I had done, feature length film. I did some documentary work. I did a documentary for the U.S. Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. That was a very, very important project for me because I used a small orchestra, and it allowed me to explore not only the history of the persecution of Jews and other people in World War II Europe, but explore my own inner voice in my own vocabulary about the horrors of that and then express it musically. When you're doing Chuck E. Cheese and Barney, you don't get a chance to do, the kinds of harmonic and melodic content that expresses the horror of World War II. So that was an
Right.
important project for
Yeah.
me and probably one of the most enjoyable I've had. So other influences though, I've been away from most of my folks are old school or older cats, because that's the world I grew up in. A lot of jazz for me. I did a lot of
Mm.
small group. I listened to everybody from Joe Henderson to the Jazz Messengers to Wayne Shorter to Weather Report to
Yeah.
there's all you got the feel of it though. Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Jazz fusion I've really gotten into the last like year or two. I love jazz fusion and like that kind of thing. I'm trying to remember one saxophonist just recently passed away too. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, it's Wayne Shorter probably who I mentioned. Wayne. So
No,
Wayne
no,
played with Miles, and then he had his own band, and it's not who you're thinking of though.
no, David Sanborn. That's what. I
Yeah,
was
David
thinking of.
Sanborn, a
David
wonderful
Sanborn,
player whose sound you can immediately recognize. He has that
Oh, yeah.
biting tenor sound. Yep.
Yes.
Yes, really great ones.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. So, of course, for many years, you had your own audio production company, Crywolf Productions. Can you kind of like talk about the process of, founding it?
Yeah. Let me talk about the entrepreneurial side to me, which really takes us to the present. It's a great question. So, I didn't start out this business thinking it would be a business. It was really a practice. It was me writing a piece of music. We had some support staff in the office, and my wife was a partner in the business and helped us with PR and business development and the back office management. But the whole business revolved around me. I initially got the sales engine going, and then it just fed on itself, and I had a lot of referrals going, and really what made the project or this 13-year period for me great was the people I had a chance to work with in the studio. A wonderful couple of different audio engineers. Robert Wexler, who has a mastering company out of North Dallas now, was extremely important. Another guy named Brian Mendelson, who did a lot of programming and was a heavy influence on the sort of technical side of what I was doing and how to integrate technology with the production of the music. It's still very good friends of mine, even 35, 40 years later. And all the players I mentioned briefly, the North Texas State players, all the players that came and were part of either the rhythm section or the horn sections or even the singers. Really, all of those folks, I created an environment like a director would in a film set. I created a very safe environment for players to come in. I would write the charts. They would follow the path, but I left a lot of room for them to contribute creatively, for the guitarists or for whoever happened to be working with me at the time. And we worked out of a couple of different studios. Most of the production we did was out of a small studio that I don't think exists anymore in North Dallas called January Sound Studios. It had a marvelous room with a very old sort of relic 3M multi-track recording machine that was 32-track digital. So this predates anything we're doing now with streaming or MP3s or WAV files or AIFF or any of the file formats. This was linear tape, but digital. So it was kind of this bridge between tape and there were no digital audio workstations then, although I was using the synclavier to call up sounds and sequence the parts. And then we would sync to tape and we would run multiple passes to get all the parts onto the recorded tape and then add the live players after that. So this was our process for recording. But back to the business. So the business flourished. I think at peak we did about 600,000 a year top line revenue. So for a single man shop and some support, that's a pretty good business. But when I turned 40, I kind of was of the mind that I wanted to do something else, and I wanted to see if I could scale a business rather than it being completely reliant on me. So I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I did a business turnaround with a commercial bakery, which has nothing to do with the subject matter of music production, but it's a demonstration of me, kind of veering out into something I don't know anything about. I partnered with my brother and his wife, and I ran this thing as a CEO for about 8 years or so. It didn't end great, but I learned a lot. I went from reading music scores to understanding business, how to raise capital, how to get an SBA loan, how to manage people. We had like 30 employees. So it was a very different animal than music production, all about me. It was now as it was about everybody else and all these employees. And it was a lot of headaches. It was a 24-hour business. We were making and delivering bagels and breads to uh, big boxes like Costco and US Food Service and Cisco Foods and Shamrock and all these companies you've heard of in food service. And then we also were delivering fresh and frozen products to niche grocery stores and restaurants, coffee shops, and then Whole Foods and Wild Oats when they were still around, and Albertsons and Smiths and all these Kroger, all the groceries. They were resellers of our product. Costco. So I learned a ton. But after that ride, I realized that my roots were really in audio production and production itself. So I circled back, and the beginning of Audivita Studios started there. So that takes us up to the present, but I'll pause here because I know I'm just kind of ranting, and you may have more questions you want to insert.
No worries at all.
No worries.
Absolutely, no worries at all, David. So of course, you kind of touched base a little tiny bit earlier. Of course, for several years, you were one of the songwriters and music directors for the long-running Barney franchise. What was it kind of like for you getting to work with them for the first time?
It was very collaborative. First of all, I'll say the process of getting in the door with them, Bob West tapped on my shoulder and introduced me, but it probably took about a year. I did a sequence of demos, and they would call me and say, "Hey, we need a song about a bouncing ball. How would you handle this?" And I would go into the studio and I would do something, and I'd send it in, and then they'd think about it for 3 months. I'd never hear from them and wonder where they went. And this is never going to happen. And I went through a few cycles of demos, predominantly with a very good friend of mine now, Dennis DeShazer, who was really one of the principals. He was one of the co-creators with Cheryl, and Kathy eventually left. So it was Cheryl and Dennis really mostly. So I was dealing with the creators of this unbelievable property that just got immediately so popular, so fast.
Huge, yeah.
It was just amazing to watch it in motion.
Iconic, yeah.
Yeah, it's so crazy to watch it grow, from those like videos that they started, the Barney in the Backyard Gang videos, and
yep.
Now they did that concert at the Majestic Theater and then the TV series. It's kind of crazy just kind of how that whole franchise grew.
Yeah, witnessing that was extraordinary, and being a part of it was a great privilege. For me, working with them was always a joy. There was a guy named Jim Rowley that was heading up the whole television production and video production side, and Jim was great to work with. I would be at the round tables when they were doing pre-production meetings, and then I'd go off and produce all the work with my team, and then come back with the finished product. When you're doing video and television production, you pre-record and then they do the playback on set. I'd be creating, rough tracks for them to sync to, and then they shoot the show, and then I come back and do the post-production and finish off the video. For me, it was a real stretch in simplicity too, as you could imagine. You're writing for pre-K, when you're used to, I'm a guy that came from jazz and film music and classical, and so I tried to strike a balance between keeping things musically interesting for myself and the musicians in the studio, while still serving the simplicity of the melodic need for the repetition for the children. And I probably, in retrospect, was still a bit too complex, but I struck a balance that worked well for everybody, and I continued along those lines in terms of like musical vocabulary. I probably stretched them a little bit into a little more complexity, but as long as you have that pure melody and simplicity on the front, kind of what was happening behind it, reharmonizations or whatever I was trying to do orchestrationally, it didn't get in the way of the simplicity. And that's how I had to manage through that. And that may have been more of an inner struggle that I'm sharing that really wasn't apparent to anybody on the outside. The most satisfying, we worked on a lot of parts of Barney. We worked on songwriting, we did videos, we did albums. Albums were extremely a happy place for them and for us, because for them, it got them out of the regiment of the television production schedule, which was brutal because they had to crank stuff out, for PBS.
Yeah, series and, all the home videos too.
Yeah, absolutely. And they were doing these in parallel. So it was grueling for the cast and for the productions team. But they would travel out. At the time I was doing the albums, most of them were produced out of our studios in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So they would fly out and be with us in Santa Fe. And so for them, the producers, they were very happy to just get out of all of that madness and come out to Santa Fe and be in this beautiful, environment and finish up the albums that we had pre-tracked for them. The talent would fly out to Bob and the voices of Baby Bop and
Yeah, Joey Johnson, Patty Words.
thank
Yeah.
you. Sorry, it comes with age. Names are the worst.
No worries at all. I mean,
I worked
years.
with all these guys.
Long while
they
ago,
would come
yeah.
in and do it. We also, so that was very happy place, the album production. And also for me, because I got to write original songs, there would be some number of public domain, but like, I think my favorite project on the album side was Sleepy Time songs.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
That was some of my better work.
Uh-huh.
That was some of my better work. But we did several. We did 6 or 7 of those. The other thing that was really, really fun for me was a series we did that eventually became a syndicated radio series. You guys have done your homework, I can tell. But Bedtime with Barney, which was related to
Yep.
that.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So you know it.
Yep.
So so we worked with
You're not alone on that, David. You're not alone.
oh man. Oh, you guys did your homework. So Bedtime with Barney was great because we would pre-record all the scripts. We would source the scripts with the help of their producer out of Dallas. We would produce the scripts with a cast in Santa Fe. We would freelance out the dialogue editing to a wonderful editor named Paul Blakemore, who's got his own CD mastering and does all kinds of classical. But he was in Santa Fe at the time and a marvelous audio guy. And so he would do all the dialogue pre-editing. They'd send it back to me. I would put it in my system and I would post score like it's a cartoon with cueiness to these stories that Barney would be narrating, and then we'd have the ancillary characters that we'd be casting. Many times they were children or they were adults doing character voices, animals or whatever they would be. And that was a lot of fun for me because basically me in a room in a studio, post scoring to these scripts with sound effects and sound design and really exploring. I could pretend I was Carl. You may not know the name Carl Stalling, but Carl Stalling was the guy that scored all the Warner Brothers stuff during the golden age of Warner Brothers cartoons. He was one of several that did this. Bill Scott was another guy who did all the Tom and Jerry. So their musical vocabulary was, by definition, Mickey Mouse. And so I did Mickey Mousing with these scores. Barney would say a line and I'd cue it in the music. And, it was very, very timed and specific. And it allowed me to just be ultra free with my vocabulary. So that was a lot of fun. Probably the most fun I had on anything I've done with Barney. It was all good, but this was particularly good. So we were cranking out, I don't know, I think we did half a dozen of these a month. The budgets were good. I was predominantly doing all the instruments, playing them all myself. We're using the synclavier. And so it was a good stretch for me. So.
That's
Great.
awesome.
Bedtime with Barney is such a cool concept. How Barney
Really
to be
is.
part of like a radio series. If the kids are just like, their parents just running them back home from like a road trip just for what they're doing, and then it's time, it's getting bedtime or something, and then you just play, and then the kids would just fall asleep like far away.
Hopefully I put him to sleep. I'm not sure. Some of these stories were kind of action packed, but at the end they had the version of Bedtime with Barney, the song.
Yeah,
I
right.
co-wrote with another composer, Alan. I'm not gonna remember his name now, but anyway, Bedtime with Barney was the theme song. Somehow they worked with MJI Distributing out of New York, and they got us into 75 markets with that series. They were about 11 minutes. So they cleared the radio, again, linear broadcast radio. They cleared the radio. There was no streaming, no YouTube, none of this. It's all pre-internet, and it did pretty well. I think they got it underwritten somehow.
Oh yeah,
and that lasted for probably a couple of years. And then they ended up taking that concept and creating a cassette. Remember those cassette and book series for children. So we were working with the publishing division of Barney. And they created a whole, I'm looking on my shelf. I used to have the packaging for that. I don't think I have it handy anymore, but probably out in the garage. But it was, you could get like 6 cassettes and, the companion book to go along with it, Bedtime with Barney. So that was a lot of fun. And we did some other stuff with the publishing group as well, where there was a music and a story companion.
Yeah.
And then
turn the page, that stuff.
Right, and then
Yeah.
you know it's so cool that that the franchise will once allowed to have that where Barney wants to do something like that, just for
Yes.
we're just so cool, you know.
Yeah.
Yes, no, they were into the brand extensions wherever they could do the Radio City Music Hall thing.
Yeah.
Barney would go on tour. They had a film that was produced by David Geffen that completely tanked. It was just horrible, but they tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barney's
Yeah.
Great
They try.
Adventure, right?
Yeah, because I
Yeah.
remember we talked to Stephen White, one of the frequent writers for them, and he said that he had
Steven's the
this like
best.
he is, and he talked about how he had this original idea for the movie, and the people behind it like just weren't happy with it. So then they
Well,
changed it, and
I love
that's
that you talked to
probably
Steve. I haven't talked to Steve in so long, and Steve and I worked very closely together on commercials and Barney. And Steve worked on Chuck E. Cheese with me. I mean, he
right.
was part
Hmm.
of our team. I don't know if he
Right.
told you
That's
that.
Yeah. He
I
talked
haven't,
a
I
bit
haven't,
about
I
Chuck E.
Maybe.
Cheese. Yeah,
yeah. I love
hmm
Steve's one of my favorite people on the planet. He was always such a joy to work with.
I'll have to tell him you say hello.
that's wonderful.
Yeah,
Yes,
please do if you have more
That's
contact
great.
with him. I
absolutely.
think
Yeah,
he's still in Dallas. Is he still in Dallas?
probably. I think. I
Think
don't know.
so.
I
Probably.
think so.
Yeah.
Probably
But
around
I
Texas.
create. So I don't know if you want to move into the current time to wherever you guys want to take this. I'm with you.
Cool. So, were you familiar with Barney at all before getting to work with them?
No, and quite frankly, it was still very early stage when I learned about Barney, and it wasn't widely known. I think their distribution was the video series you mentioned earlier that I'd never worked
Hmm.
on. Um,
Hmm.
but that predated me. But he wasn't widely popular or widely known until a couple of years after I joined the team, and then later Joe Phillips joined the team, and he was heading up the television
Right.
series and doing some songwriting alongside of me. And there was another guy in the mix, music producer. You probably know who I'm thinking of.
Bob
Third guy.
Singleton.
Bob
Yes, thank you.
Singleton?
Bob was the
Yeah.
original.
He's a
Bob,
previous
yeah,
guest too.
he's
Yeah.
Previous
He's
guest.
great. and
yeah,
he was
he's
the original.
wonderful.
He was the original guy, but they just had too much work. He
Yeah.
couldn't handle it all, so
Yeah.
brought in the rest
Right.
of us.
Yeah.
We all had our different takes on how to do it. I'm sure there were some stylistic differences as well.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So this may be a tough question to answer in a way, but do you have any favorite Barney songs you wrote?
Yeah, I do. Listen to the Nighttime, I think was probably
Oh
my
my
favorite.
That's a good one.
God.
Yeah.
Beautiful
That
song.
was
It's got a mood.
that
It's
is
got
so
it's got a
great.
vibe and a mood to it. It's probably
Yeah, like
not
one almost almost
Yeah.
Barney song. Really have it's like I kind of feel like energetic, but it's great to have that type of
it was more of a
kind
mood,
of tone it down and
nocturnal.
relaxing.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good,
And I don't know that they told me they wanted that, but that's what I came out. Well, it was about nighttime, so it had
Such
this
a
nocturnal.
beautiful track.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
It
No, I
is.
appreciate that, and that I think just the soul of that tune I liked a lot. There are probably a few others that I'm not thinking of now, but that one really has a place in my heart. I think I hit a nerve with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, one that really comes to mind that you wrote was because I remember it so well was The Land of Make Believe.
Oh, and that's another one that I wrote that's a
Yeah.
good one. And there's
Oh,
another
yeah.
one that I'm thinking of, Blanket of Love.
Yeah. Yep. That also came from Bedtime with
Okay.
Barney. Yeah.
And
Right.
Gina, I think the artist's name is Gina Easton.
Hmm.
Who am I thinking of? The percussionist.
Yeah.
Is it Gina
I
Easton?
think so.
Anyway, she covered it and released it. I remember.
Oh wow.
I'm not sure I've got her name right, but anyway, that was an interesting experience too. But yeah, there were a few that popped up.
Yeah, like Popcorn.
Oh yeah, Popcorn. Yeah,
Classic.
Yeah, it's a
absolutely.
classic. They use that one a lot.
Oh my God, you guys, you're calling my tunes classic. That's quite an honor.
The having fun
The
Oh,
Having Fun
yes.
song. Yeah.
Having
and the
fun
once
songs. So you
and
can
one,
see they were
once
call-
and once upon
Once
a time.
upon a time. Once
Yeah.
upon a time. Did I write that? I
West
think I did write
Soul,
that.
Yeah.
Phyllis Cesario.
Yeah, Phyllis
they
Cesaro, who
did.
played Stella the Storyteller, her and Barney sang that in the first time it was used, and yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
yeah.
ever knew Phyllis, but yeah, we've heard a lot of stories about her from people we've interviewed on this show, and yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely lost her too soon, I feel.
Way
Yeah.
too soon.
Yeah.
So you're saying who is it? That
And
you
today
mentioned?
we can say
Phyllis Cesaro,
Phyllis,
who
my
played
wife.
Phyllis Cesaro, who played Stella the Storyteller.
Oh, okay, right. Yes, I didn't work with her directly. My wife's name is
Hmm.
Phyllis, and there aren't many Phyllises in the world. So when you said Phyllis, that's where I went. No,
Oh.
yeah,
No
I
worries.
wasn't. I didn't work directly with her. No.
Yeah.
Hmm.
No worries.
Gotcha.
Today we can say,
Oh
Oh
yes.
yeah.
Oh yes.
let's do today.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love
Man,
that
you're really
one.
jogging my memory. I mean, I don't even know that I have
And
all
and
the
and let's
master
and let's
scrolls.
play together.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Let's
And
play
Yeah.
together.
laugh with me.
Laugh with me. I wrote that as well.
That was another one that they used
That's a good one. Kind of a
probably
high
till the
energy
end.
thing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that was later. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
A
and
lot
and
of good
the
ones.
an alphabet parade.
Oh yes,
Alphabet
the
Parade,
alphabet
yeah.
parade. Boy, you're
And
jogging
it
my
kind of have
memory.
something. And kind of
Alphabet Parade it's kind of like it's like with the Alphabet Parade, you can see how words are made and help
Yes.
us learn to read. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
You
fun.
know,
and you
it's
did
funny
that
you
kind
say
of
it's funny you say the lyrics because I wrote all the lyrics to all the songs I wrote for them, and that
Right.
it strikes me that wasn't usually the part of the equation for advertising. Usually, I was working with the advertising agency lyrics, but in this particular instance, they would just call me with a blank piece of paper and say, "We need a song about alphabet,"
Yeah,
and
and
yeah.
I would submit a demo. You guys will find this. The process was, I'd write the tune, I'd get it going, and then I would voice Barney doing an imitation of Barney, and I sang
oh,
all
Right.
the children's choirs parts. I sang in falsetto, 2 octaves above, and I ended up really wrecking my voice over this. By the way, this is not widely known, but yeah, I ended up having a little nodule. I had to have surgery to
Oh
during
gosh.
really?
yeah during the bakery period. Yeah,
Wow.
later. Yeah, it
So
was
basically, you
because all
can't just have to.
these multiple takes
Yeah.
doing up an octave just wrecked my voice. And I
Right.
would do
So
my version of
basically,
Barney, so they can hear what it would be in the final production, as close as I
right.
could
So
approximate.
now Bob can like try to
Get
Bob
do
knows
that
like
music.
same.
how the melody goes and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, he could listen to it and he could see. I would plant some ideas with the chuckles and where to do the Barney shtick and sort of here's how I'm because you're writing for the character, so you have. So I wanted the team at
Right.
Barney to not hear just David singing the song, but hear I love you, and I would do my version. It was horrible, but at least it got him into the headspace of
Yeah.
it, and
Right.
it wasn't easy on my voice, but I think I sold some songs that way.
And you kind of did like some like
Thing.
kind of like a holiday related songs, like it's snowing,
It's
and
snowing. I love
Oh
the
yeah,
The
I
holidays.
like that
holidays.
song
right.
too.
Yeah.
It's snowing. The leaves are blowing. Yeah,
R-
I
r-
can't
Yeah.
r-
remember all the words now. But
Red
yeah.
Such a
cheeks are
fun song.
showing. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank
Right.
you. Yes,
And
thank
they
you.
did that, and then I love the holidays, which I remember because I saw on YouTube
Yes.
they did that one year at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
Oh my goodness,
Ah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Yeah, I love the holidays. It's true.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love to
Yeah.
spend my days with you. I don't remember the lyrics now, but yeah.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
Boy, you guys are really freaking me out here with this stuff because it's been 35, 40 years.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
you're very welcome, David.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, no, and thank you very much. I thought I was just appearing on a podcast, and now I'm appearing on a brainwashing session. No, it's really, but don't forget, I love you.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
There you go. There you go.
Right.
So you kind of
Right.
touched up on this a little bit ago. In addition to writing songs for Barney, you also produced several Barney albums. I
Yeah.
know you kind of talked about like, the Sleepy Time album and things like that, but overall, what was that aspect like for you, producing albums for Barney?
Well, again, it was a real. I could feel the joy from the team getting out of the heat of battle and coming out to, do the final mixes of these records. So it would start with I'd write usually 5 or 6 songs and I'd submit them, and they would say, well, we like this one, not so much. Hey, can you do this with this one? This one feels a little complex, whatever it was. They would give me feedback like any client would, and I would revise them and send them in. Oh yeah, that's going to work great. And then we would go into pre-production, and usually that meant me sequencing all the parts. If I had live musicians involved, I would bring them in. But for a lot of the Barney albums, I don't think we'd use guitar, and we had a few instances where we were using live players, but for the most part, the live part of those were, of course, the characters, and then the children's choir, which was fundamental to everything we did. So and then of course there'd also be an equal number of public domain or songs they own that were written by somebody else that I would redo for the record. So, and this was when we were doing CDs. So we would basically master all the songs. I'd bring my engineer, usually it was David Rosenblatt, who I worked with for many years in Dallas. We'd fly him out and he would work on recording and all the mixing, all the voices, all of the multi-track, all the tracking of my parts from the synclavier or synthesizers, and whatever else we would use to get the project completed. And then the client would come out for the final mix. I think they came out for the sessions, the recording of the vocals for the main principals too. And then we would go into final mix. So they'd usually be camping out with us for a week or so, maybe 10 days, enjoy Santa Fe, the red and green chili, and then, and then they'd leave and we'd have an album. But it was a different kind of project than, certainly a 30-second commercial for me, or just writing a song and then sending it off to them to do whatever they'd like to do with it on the television series or something else. So it was profoundly satisfying for all of us.
Yeah, the one album that comes to mind that you produced was because I remember as a kid seeing a promo for it on one of the home videos was I Love to Sing with Barney, which was like the
Yes.
10th anniversary
Yes.
Oh,
album.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, they all had their
Right.
magic, they all had something in them that was exciting. I wish I had all the albums in front of me because it would probably jog some memories about some of the writing. You guys have helped there with that piece. But the holiday album was, very interesting.
Oh yeah.
The bedtime album
Yeah, and a
was
great day for
very
learning.
great day for learning. Yeah, that was a little bit later. I Love to Sing and Play
Then
was
there was
later, I
like
think.
Run, Skip, and Sing or
Run,
something.
skip, jump, and
Yeah, run,
right.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Run, skip, and jump, I think, or something.
Yeah, something like
So
that. But
yeah,
yeah,
I
a
mean,
lot of good
they
ones.
all did well. And we sold a lot of records. I know that, and I know that this was a time when the record industry has been completely disrupted by iTunes and the like. But at the time, from a standpoint of royalties and composing an album with 5 or 6 songs on it, that was meaningful financially during that period because they'd sell the whole record and you'd get royalties for everything, on the mechanical rights. But now, because you can stream one song at a time, the royalty mix is a lot lower. And this is true for all composers. This isn't just about me. This is just about the industry being disrupted. So that was an unfortunate piece, but I understand the efficiency of that from the consumer's perspective, because you're only getting the songs you want. So it's an interesting transformation the industry went through. But for those of us who work in the record business, it was not positive in terms of royalty streams. So it's just a sidebar.
Gotcha.
It's not, it's the industry changing, which is what happens.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I mean, I know since we're kind of like right now talking about like produce side of things at the moment. I know
Yeah.
I know you haven't like done like too much of it compared with done with albums, but you also actually got to produce some of the videos too.
Yeah, I actually
If you
didn't.
do remember.
So what I did with the videos was the following.
Yeah.
I wrote, they would send me the finished cut.
Okay.
And then I would score the incidental music. So I
Right,
was truly
okay.
film scoring.
Okay.
Joe,
Okay.
I think Joe Phillip, let's see, did I produce the pre-records on those? I may have produced the pre-records as well.
Yeah.
On some of those, the ones they
comparing.
would shoot to, and then
Yeah.
I'd
Right.
resync to them and finish them up. I may have done some of that. I think Joe
Yeah.
Phillips was
Right.
mostly doing that part of the operation at the time. And then they'd send me the final with the temp tracks in it, and then I would do the incidental scoring, setting the mood for the scenes and stuff. And it
Yeah.
was nice.
Kind of
It was
like.
nice. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like we did like with like Adventure Bus and It's Time for Counting and the
Yes.
Santa's with Barney and When We
Yeah.
Go.
Yes. I
Yeah.
believe that I don't know if I worked on all of them, but I worked on a number of them.
Right.
Just
Or
doing what we like to
probably
call
just a little thing. They just completely forgot that you did work on that.
Yeah, I think I was
Which is-
credited on those. I probably was for the instrument
Yeah.
additional music or something. But it was that type of scoring is interesting to me because it's the closest thing to film scoring that you can get to as a composer. It's similar to the Bedtime with Barney radio series because I was left in a room by myself and there wasn't a lot of feedback from anybody because it's very it's incidental. It's behind. I'm just supporting the emotions of what's going on in the story, and so but it's very free from a musical standpoint. You can experiment and go places, and it's not a song production is, it's got to be that structure, but this is largely unstructured. And between you and I do very well with an unstructured environment. So
I was gonna say briefly, the albums were crazy popular because they had, I think Billboard around '95 had just started their kids album chart, and they were crazy popular. Like Barney's Sleepy Time songs, I think hit
really,
the top 10. A lot of the
wow,
top
I'd
10.
love to see that actually.
Yeah,
I've never
yeah,
seen that.
yeah.
This was Billboard.
Billboard, yeah, Billboard's kids
Oh,
albums
man. That would
chart.
be
I
really
think
cool
it
to
started
get.
in like
Interesting.
That's
1995.
crazy.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I'd like, if you don't mind sending that over or something after.
Just very briefly, in moving on from Barney, your company also contributed to studios like Amblin, NBCUniversal, Disney. Could you kind of talk about your work with them as well?
Yeah, we did a lot of ADR and looping and recording of voiceovers. It wasn't so much my music; it was more our studio. So this was a period of time you're referring to where we were in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and we had a small studio there. So there were several celebrities in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and so for or certain television series like Disney would have certain people who lived in Santa Fe, um, who we would record for the character voices for animation they were doing. So we worked with Disney Animation. Amblin was a TV series that didn't last long. I don't even think it actually ever aired. It was called Earth 2. And so we had there were 9 principal actors that they would shoot these in Santa Fe or northern New Mexico, because it kind of looks like an alien planet here, with the desert and the high desert and all that. And then we would re-record lines that needed to be re-recorded. So it's called ADR and looping. And so we were the studio that they used to do a lot of that work. So that's where the studio names come from. We would record celebrities like Gene Hackman doing the Birdcage, a couple lines from that movie. Marsha Mason came out. There's some others. Ally McGraw, actress, who we would record doing voiceovers for a documentary series or something. So in that was the capacity we were in, dialogue recording or re-recording.
Nice. So in 2016, you founded Audivita Studios. Since I know
Yes,
we're
sir.
getting close to wrapping up, can you like briefly kind of talk about like what kind of
Yes.
how
So
that
this
came
was a
about?
recast. This was my finally, after years of being in businesses that were all about me doing it. I created a studio and a great team. We're a virtual company. We produce about 200 audiobooks a year, partnering with publishers and authors, and we have about 30 to 50 podcasts, depending on the time of year. Original series podcasts in production, and that's our business. It's a two teams with shared studio resources, and it's been a phenomenal project. We're in our 6th year now, and we're growing.
That's great.
We're growing great, and
Oh,
I'm not essential to the business operation. I'm still kind of the face of the brand, but I'm non-essential, which is very nice after having to be the guy writing every note of music. That model is gone, and so for where I am in my life, I think it's good for us now. So I've been really working on growing that business with that team.
Absolutely.
Nice.
And
Congratulations. Congratulations
yes.
about what's happening and looking forward what's
yes,
coming up down the road.
Thank
But
you. Thank
yes,
you
right
for
on.
inviting me to be
Of
on with you
course.
guys
yes,
today.
and Matt, take us home with the very last question.
Very last question here. We ask all of our guests. This podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how do you define the word nostalgia?
Well, for me, nostalgia, I have to go to film noir. I've become a student of what's the film noir period, which are movies generally with a femme fatale or black and white, and they were made mostly in between the 1940s in the U.S. and into the early 50s. And so, if you ever watch TCM Turner Movie Classics,
Oh yeah,
that's where I like to go for my nostalgia.
Yeah.
And
great channel.
Eddie Muller is the host of Noir Alley, which is airing in real time. It airs on Saturday nights. So I
Nice.
highly recommend it if you like old films.
Absolutely great words to
Awesome.
end
Thank you
on.
so much.
All
All
right.
right,
Thanks,
David,
guys.
thank you so much.
Be
This was
well.
fun.
All right.
Thank
Keep
Thanks
me
you.
again,
posted
David.
on when
Means
this
a
is
lot.
releases. All right.
Yes,
Bye.
We'll do. We'll let
absolutely.
you know.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye bye.
See you, David.
Thank you so much.
It's
Uh,
goodbye from us as well, everyone. Keep on the lookout for more film interviews coming your way. Absolutely enjoy our time with David Bernard Wolf. Links to the Audivita website will be in the description down below for anyone who wants to connect with the team there or check out their work. But yeah,
more throughout Just David's as well, and more.
And Jake, take us home. What do we say?
Keep nostalgia alive. Okay, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
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 Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.